Alright guys, we have finally made it to period 4 of global interactions from 1450 to 1750, and this is the time when we actually can start talking about globalization. In other words, the world has finally come together from this exploration. So the main aspects of this period are going to deal with how people got to where they were going, how the world got linked, and what were the effects of it, what were the social, the political, the economic, the religious effects of all of this stuff happening, and finally bringing the world together for the first time. So the first thing we've got to look at is why this European exploration occurs. Why does it begin to expand during this era? And the factors are as follows. Number one, there had been a lot of technological borrowing up to this time between East and West. And it's during this period that Europe finally begins to put it together. And we're talking about ship design and navigation. With navigation in particular, the compass and the astrolabe. Also, the desire to spread Christianity. Partly due to the competition between Catholics and Protestants that is occurring during this period, and also trade, spices. I mean, that's the whole reason Columbus comes over to the New World. He's trying to find a western route to get to the Indies, and also to Gama in Portugal. They're trying to get there just in the opposite direction. So all of these things, along with the three G's that we talked about in class, God, gold, and glory, combined to make this stuff really kick off at the beginning of this period. All right, so as we're talking about this exploration, we're talking about Western Europe. We're talking about Spain, Portugal, England, France as we go forward. And the question would be, why not Eastern Europe? Why not Russia? Why not some of the Central or Eastern European countries? Well, it kind of boils down to geography and the fact that a lot of these places are locked in by ice for a significant portion of the year. I mean, if you look at the modern day country of Russia right in here, their only access to the sea really is up here towards the Arctic Circle. And as you know, it's blocked up in ice for a majority of the year, so it's impossible to get boats out. Also, Russia during this time is expanding more on going eastward and forming their land empire because they have the whole area of what is now known as Siberia to go out and explore and to bring into their empire. And tying into what I just said, the location of it and the access to the sea. Also, going along the why not route, why not China? Why are they not an important factor in the beginning of this unit? And it's really because they felt they had everything that they needed. Like we talked about this, a little bit of a superiority complex compared to the rest of the world. And although they did do some exploring in the Indian Ocean region, or not even really exploring. They were just going out and showing what they could do with the expeditions of Zheng He, which we looked at with the size of his ships compared to Columbus and all that stuff. They never really got outside of that, and they never really took anywhere over because they didn't really have to. And after these expeditions happened, eventually the Confucian bureaucracy gets a little upset at it. They feel like it's too expensive. It's not worth the trouble because there's nothing in it for them. So they shut these things down, and that ends their very tiny um, exposure, their very tiny era of exploration and going out. So not a lot comes out of it because they didn't feel like it was worth it. It was costing them too much money. So we've kind of done the why not. The question now would be why? Why Portugal and Spain? And they are the two main ones that really kick off this era of exploration. Well, first of all, if you look at it, it's their geography. Spain and Portugal are the two most western countries in Europe, and to get where they're going or the routes that they're going to try to take, they've got to have access to the Atlantic Ocean, which is right here. So they both have a sea coast on the Atlantic, so they've got a natural jumping off point to do this. Second of all, there's a lot of patriotic energy, particularly in Spain, because of something called the Reconquista in 1492, in which they took back Spain from Muslim rule. We talked about how Islam had spread into Western Europe, particularly Spain, during this time. Also, a willingness to spend money, which is a key thing. These expeditions, these adventures are not cheap, so you've got to have the financial resources and the want to spend the money to do it. And also the desire to find a different route to bypass Venetian or Italian middlemen and get around the Ottoman Empire to get to the spices. In other words, make it a lot more cheap to get these things. So how did Portugal get to India? Well, first of all, there's got to be some kind of inspiration for it, somebody to get the ball rolling, and that guy was Prince Henry the Navigator. Now, while he was never an explorer himself, he was the inspiration, the kickstarter of all this, if you will, because he was the one who had the vision for it and the means to make it happen. So he sets up a school of navigation to explore how they're going to go about doing this exploration. Not to use the same word twice there, but that's kind of the way it worked. As they get exploring, or as they go to exploring. It's not one person makes the entire route to India at first. It's kind of a series of stepping stones to get there. So the first place that they go, and you need to be able to recognize this on the map, is Madeira, Islands. Then the next expedition goes to the Azores Islands, which are, I can't see on my map here, somewhere out in here. Then the Canary Islands, Cape of Good Hope, and I'm just going to kind of trace the entire route, and eventually to India. So in a series of expeditions here, they eventually make their way around the southern tip of Africa and make their way into India. Now, the Spanish realize that the Portuguese are going around the tip of Africa, and they can't go that way because of the competition, the rivalry that's going on. So they have the idea, and it's particularly Columbus, thinks there's a shortcut to get there by just going straight up west. And once again, this boils down to the three G's of God, Gold, and Glory. And Columbus makes his way to the West Indies, I guess as they're called. Now, you can kind of trace his routes on this and all this kind of stuff, but be aware the three G's and how they tie into him, that he's aligned with Spanish exploration, and he makes it to what we come to know as the New World. All right, so out of Columbus's exploration comes the most important thing we're going to talk about during this period, or one of the most important things, and it's another one of those watershed moments like I've talked about before, like the Neolithic Revolution and other things, and it's the Columbian Exchange, which just basically means the transfer of plants, animals, diseases, and things like that from one place to another. In this case, the Old World to the New World. The Old World being Europe, the New World being here in North America, South America, and the Western Hemisphere. So you need to be aware of some of the things that are transferred from place to place and the effects of it, which we'll talk about in class. From the old to the new, these are things that are introduced into the Americas because of the Columbian Exchange. And we're talking horses, pigs, cows, sugarcane, wheat, and rice. From new to old, from the Americas to Europe, potatoes, tomatoes, tobacco, maize, and chili peppers. And we'll deal with some of the consequences and effects of this in class. The biggest one from a standpoint of the Americas, now the horse and the other animals do play a role in this, but disease is really the defining characteristic of it. And when I say disease, I'm talking about smallpox. And when it comes in, it destroys or it wipes out upwards of 90% of the native population throughout North and South America, or North America and the Caribbean, I guess I should say. And you need to be aware of like the effects of this, what it does to the population, how it allows European or Spanish conquistadors to come in and take these places over and really allow Spain and Portugal to a certain extent as we go, but mainly Spain, to establish themselves over here and exploit the resources and things of North America and South America. We also have the transfer of people due to the Columbian Exchange, and the big way in which this happens is the adventation of Atlantic slavery. Now, once again, still not to the point of United States plantation slavery in the South. A majority of slaves who came over during this time were going to work on sugarcane plantations in the Caribbean and South America. As we move forward into the period, colonists begin to come over. Particularly English, with the formation of the 13 colonies in what comes to be known as America, and also indentured servants, which are a little bit different than slaves in the fact that they are free. They're choosing to come over, but they're kind of tied into working on these plantations or working in agriculture for a certain period of time in return for having their passage paid to the New World. We also have the transfer of religions due to the Columbian Exchange, and in particular Christianity making its way over to the New World in the form of missionaries who brought it over. As it comes, you see a lot of syncretism, and there's that key word again, that blending of religions, which is native beliefs with Christianity. Also, the exchange of trade due to the Columbian Exchange, in particular metals. We're talking gold and silver right here, and silver probably being the most important. Because it becomes the main medium of exchange, or the main mode of exchange between East-West trade during this period. We talked about, you did a DBQ on it, on the global flow of silver and how it impacted China. Well, none of that happens without the Columbian Exchange, without exploration to the New World. So the silver is being traded for Asian spices, silk, etc., and a lot of it's going through the warehouse, as I like to call it, or I called it in class, of the Philippines, and making its way into being distributed from there into China. The significance of it, this is the first example we have had of a global trade network, and that'll be a theme that we have going forward. Okay, so now we take it out of the global context and boil it down to Latin America. And what happened to Latin America and the Atlantic world, which is basically our side of the world, during this time period because of exploration, because of the Columbian Exchange and all that stuff? Well, the first thing is there's a lot of social shifting that happens. In other words, you see a lot of new social groups develop in Latin America due to the immigration or the migration of Europeans over here. And you can see the social hierarchy on the left, but you need to be aware of the different aspects of these groups. At the top of the pyramid, you have Peninsulares, who were Europeans born in Europe who made their way over to the New World, to the Atlantic world for whatever reasons. Then under that, and it's hard for me to read on this camera, but you have Creoles, who were Europeans, but they were born in the New World. Okay, so they're Spanish or Portuguese or whatever it is, particularly Spanish in this, but they're Spanish, but they're born in the Caribbean, in South America, in Mexico, wherever it is. Next, you have mestizos, who are people who are a mix of European and natives. Then you have mulattoes, a mix of Europeans and Africans. Then you have Africans, then you have the natives. So we talked about social hierarchies all throughout this class. You need to know kind of the powers that these people have and the advantages that one group has over another, depending on where they're at on this pyramid. As far as the economic systems that begin to affect Latin America, number one, you see the beginnings of triangular trade, which you can see exemplified on this map, with the goods coming from Europe to the New World and Africa. Get an idea of what products and people, because slavery ties into this as well, get an idea of what is transferred from one place to another. The next is mercantilism, and it comes to be a justification for European powers having colonies. All mercantilism boils down to is you need to export more products than you import. In other words, you got to sell more than you buy so you make money. And they use this in the colonial era, kind of starting right now, in the fact that they could use and exploit these colonies for raw materials and then do what they did with them after that and sell them. So basically, you're not paying for the materials you're getting from your colonies, and it's helping you make more money. All right, so let's go away from Latin America for a second and focus on some continuities in the global network. In other words, what stayed the same in this period comparatively to the period before. Religion is the first one. Islam is continuing to spread. You can see the region of Dar al-Islam right here. Buddhism begins to move across. It's still moving, so it's continuity, but it's moving across Southeastern Asia. And Hinduism just kind of stays where it's at. Okay, so in religion, there are the continuities are that Islam and Buddhism keep spreading, Hinduism doesn't, stays completely in India, or mainly in India. All right, next in our continuities are trade and agriculture in the Indian Ocean world. Things are just going as they have up to this point through the Indian Ocean Trade Network, same products being traded, same methods, all that. The Atlantic world at this time begins to pass the Indian Ocean in the volume of trade and the value of trade that's going down. And most people still farm, all right, subsistence farming. They're just making enough to survive. All right, so that wraps up chapter 10, which is the first chapter dealing with period 4. Next, we'll move on to chapter 11, talking about changes to societies and methods of production.